Hey everybody, 7 here. And Planet Crafter just had another really big update. Most of the contents of the update is more of a quality of life increase. A couple of quirks and oddities that the player base had suggested, and Maiju, always being the player-oriented developer that they are, decided to implement. As well as an insane detective hunt and scavenger hunt kind of thing that was cracked just about within 24 hours of the release being dropped. So while most of the content of the update is, like I said, just some simple quality of life stuff, the brunt of the update is going to be a massive spoiler for people who haven't uncovered the detectives' work themselves, and should have speculation into a massive turn that Maiju is going to be having for the future of the game, likely in 2024. So let's get into this. So first up, there's a few new blueprints that we can get. So as always, I like to save all of my blueprints through a playthrough just for when these things happen. And this has the pinning. Okay, so it appears as though the blueprint ship tier 1 may be unlocked by default. And then the blueprint ship will give you the tier 2 one. So let's slam these out real quick and then see what they actually do. Alright, so the tier 1 takes aluminum, osmium, 2 cobalt, a super, and a magnesium. So even though it appears to be unlocked fairly early, probably through TI level, it does have some fairly up there resource count. Oh, and we're now up to so many microchips that you're actually going to have to get a little picky choosy on what you want to bring with you. You know, I was going to say the air filter can probably come off, but if you're going to be going underwater at any time, you are probably still going to want that to just reduce the amount of oxygen that you're using while you're underwater. And all you're supposed to have to do is right click. Look at that. And you can just pin the various recipes that you want to look out for. And then as you acquire them, it'll highlight them and let you know when you have the resources necessary to build the thing that you want to build. Very cool. I would imagine that probably works in crafting stations as well. Oh yeah, you can just pin any item that you want to make in a crafting station and any item that we want to construct. Alright, so let's get the tier 2 one made up then. Alright, so with the tier 2 one... Oh, nice. Now it allows you to select up to 3 that you want simultaneously. I can see that being very helpful for if you're doing a really large building project somewhere and you want to have multiple items pinned because you want to have like a larger base with multiple machines and things like that. That could be a very cool feature for just making massive base expansion, especially in late game. Alright, as the tokens keep popping in, let's get into some more quality of life issues that they addressed. So stepping down here to one of the auto crafters, there are now even more recipes you can make with auto crafting, including every bit of the food stuff. Once you have the cooking station unlocked, the auto crafter will now be able to auto craft all of these items for you, and they are also carryable by the drones. Now the reason they made them carryable by drones is because the food stuff is now actually sellable at the space trading. So over here at the space trading rocket, you can see that the cookies have been added and you can now be a space cookie trader. I'm not sure why so many people wanted this, but apparently there was enough that Maiju decided to enter it. There also was one other tiny little detail added up here towards the top. So not only does it say what your current Terra tokens available are, but it also now indicates the all-time Terra tokens traded, so you can know just how far along you've progressed towards certain milestones and I think a few achievements as well. And then back up to our crafting stations. This is one of my favorite updates that they had. When you upgrade a piece of equipment, you no longer need to remove the previous piece of equipment to get the next stage up. So if I'm wearing an oxygen tank tier 3 and have the super alloy and the cobalt, I no longer have to remove the oxygen tank previously so that I can get the next upgraded oxygen tank. And it slips it right into the inventory slot that it acquired before. Very, very cool feature. And I actually was able to mess around with that a little bit in the series that I was running before this update actually even dropped. So it seems like parts of the update dropped behind the scenes before the big announcement was released. So upgrading your gear without having to take it off get that bigger backpack, get that bigger oxygen tank, but being able to just keep it on your person and not have to monkey around with the inventory slots, that one is probably my favorite so far. All right, so those are the additions, but let's talk about a couple of fixes that they've had. So everybody knows that it's fairly common here and there to accidentally get yourself glitched and stuck into a mountain, have to use the unstuck feature. They fixed it so that a lot of the hiccups and collision areas are no longer going to do that. So you should have a little bit harder time of getting stuck into those mountains and have just a little bit more of an immersive gameplay experience, which is always good. The volcanic biome and the waterfall area both had hiccups with the frequency and the spawning of the meteor impacts, so they've been able to adjust that and make that function more properly now. And one of the biggest ones that I was hearing about with the addition of the randomized ore locations was that the randomized ore was not fully functioning the way that they intended it to or the way that they wanted it to. So they've now added some magnesium, some cobalt, which should, in theory, be able to balance out the general pool of the randomized ore locations and should fix that some ore locations weren't even spawning at all and weren't even mineable. Now let's get into the insane detective work that the internet has been able to put together. Now, this section I'm going to be going into the treasure hunt that they released, and this is going to have a massive spoiler. From what I was reading on it, a huge challenging event where the information needed to trigger this was randomized. You didn't have a guarantee of it spawning in your world. You had to re-roll a new world frequently in order to get a chance of some of these things even spawning in. Then you had to decode words. It was quite the thing. So if you don't want all of this spoiled, you can go to the official Planet Crafter Steam page, and there's a pinned comment for Treasure Hunt. Look in there and you can see all the discussion of all the people that have been struggling through it and how it got solved within 24 hours, which absolutely baffles me. But to kick it off, Maiju posted 2 photos of crashed satellites that don't exist, and they had the coordinates. Now, some people were saying they went to those coordinates, found nothing. That's because a total of, I think, over a dozen satellites were added to the game, but like I said, randomized on whether or not you'd even be able to find them. So you'd have to be lucky enough to have it, lucky enough to stumble across it, access it, and get a 2-letter code. After uncovering all of them, you'd be left with a string of letters that would then need to be descrambled. Descrambling them led you to a website that was owned by Sentinel Corp. So upon accessing the Sentinel Corp owned website, they ask you to put in your sector name, which you would have had to have remembered from the earliest message that you got from Sentinel Corp, identifying where you were sent and the sector that you were sent to. Inputting the Ezekiel Prime sector gave you a bunch of gibberish at the bottom of the screen, which later sleuths immediately were able to discover that this was not just gibberish, it was a set of coordinates, but more than that, it was a set of coordinates that were simultaneously attached to the custom settings that they just recently introduced. So you had to not only start a new file, but start a new file with a very specific set of custom settings and go to a very specific set of coordinates. So without the specific custom settings, going to the coordinates would yield nothing, and the item that you're supposed to find wouldn't spawn. So let's get into this and we'll find out what exactly was hidden. So after all of that, we have these specific settings, these specific checkboxes, and then with this given game mode, now we have a set of coordinates we have to go find. And here we are approaching the coordinates. So, Warden Altar and a crate. Let's hit this. God, these never get old. Even if they're just temporary, which I imagine this one probably is temporary. I don't imagine this a permanent fixture, especially with all the rigmarole of all of the settings that you have to engage with. Oh, let's get in here and find what's up. So as you can see, it opens up into 4 of the Planet Crafter visages. And the only thing here is 2024. So now it's time for the speculation. And so far I've seen 2 theories, one of which I have very little faith there or notion of, and one I've got 90% of my eggs in. So one theory was they were saying, oh, maybe there will be NPCs in place. Because the website, and I was trying to not have as many spoilers as possible in this, the Sentinel Corp website that it directs you to talked of other survivors within the sector. Most of them did not make it. A handful are still around. So there was a theory that maybe some of the storyline people that you were coming across through the data pads and the terminals, maybe some of them you'll interact with and you'll have NPCs. I'm not thinking that that's probably going to be the case. One of the things that's been requested just repeatedly since this game first came out and was even modded in by some people in the modding community was multiplayer. So I'm interpreting this to mean 4-player multiplayer in 2024, and I am here for it. So this has been the big new update to the Planet Crafter. I'd love to hear what you're most excited about. The quality of life stuff, the new automation things, being able to sell cookies in space is apparently a thing that people were excited about. Or for me, 4-player multiplayer question mark? 2024? Maybe? But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this update to the Planet Crafter, and hope to see you in the next one. This is Seven. Bye.